Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today we are going to be talking about a very short novella that packs quite a punch by Jack Vance, and that is The Last Castle. And we'll start this video with a quick synopsis of the plot, or at least the ground situation of the plot. And I think this might be set in the same universe or a similar universe to his Dying Earth stuff. It is far future Earth, and for some odd reason, either for a dying Earth or for a post-apocalyptic, I don't know. For some odd reason, humanity's decided to depart Earth many thousands of years ago. Humanity departed Earth, leaving some behind, and went and colonized the star systems. And then a group of people decide to come back to Earth, and they bring with them these highly technological castles. They're called castles. And they also bring back with them a plethora of enslaved alien species. And this is the story of one of those enslaved species having enough and deciding to rebel. And they basically take down all the castles but one. And this is the story of the fight between this alien species rebelling and the very we'll say pampered aristocracy of the people in the castle. So that's basically what this book is about, or at least where it begins. So before I get into really breaking down my review of The Last Castle, I want to talk just really quick about the author and his publication history. So we'll start by talking about Jack Vance. And I don't usually do this way, but I'm going to read a chunk from the About the Author section at the back of this book in this case. And this is the version that I read. Jack Vance was born in 1920, served in the U.S. Merchant Marine during World War II, and has supported himself at times by jobs ranging from construction worker to jazz musician. He has written more than 40 novels and 75 shorter works in fantasy, mystery, horror, and science fiction. He was one of the primary writers for the popular Captain Video TV stories. Vance is known for a sly wit, a magnificently colorful imagination, and characters who combine the heroic and the absurd in quantities that approximate the human condition more accurately than most writers ever dream of. He is a fine sailor, plays a mean banjo, and lives in Oakland, California with his family. I wonder if there's video of Vance out there playing the banjo. I'd like to see it if there is. That sounds fantastic. So that's Jack Vance. The Last Castle was first published in the April 1966 Galaxy Science Fiction magazine, and it is a very thick copy for that month. And it does include the entirety of The Last Castle with really incredible illustrations. So if you want to get the first ever published version of this story, this is the thing to get. And it's really good because often you have to buy 2 or 3 magazines to get the whole run of a novel. And they're usually not abridged, but they're later rewritten and expanded when they're done in novel form. That is not the case with this one. Again, this is illustrated by Gauguin, or I think that's how you pronounce it, Gaughan. I know we've had something else on this channel that was also done by this illustrator. But anyway, there are incredible illustrations in this. I'm hoping that I can find them. If not, I'll take pictures of them on my phone and put them up here as we talk about the different alien races in this. So after it was published in 1966, I know that it was an Ace double. I don't have a copy of that. But the first cover, and you can't see it as well on this, I think the Ace double has this picture blown up. And I'll put that over here. And I think this is supposed to be a mech, the picture here. But yeah, later it was published this way. And this... The reason I chose this for the first Jack Vance that I have read is because it won both the 1967 Nebula and the 1967 Hugo for Best Novelette, and that's incredible. There's probably other cases of this. I haven't studied these awards that extensively, but I've never come across a case where one book took both awards. That's really incredible. You know that it had to have been really successful at the time that it came out, and I think that it was. Yeah, so it won both of those awards that year. So definitely worth a read on this one. Let's get down to the review proper. I want to start with talking about what is really working in this novella, and that is the world building. And I believe that this is the reason that it won the Hugo and the Nebula, is because of its incredible world building. And I think this is something that Jack Vance is known for. Please note, this is the first Vance that I've ever read. I do plan on doing a lot more Vance on the channel, but this is the first that I've done. And the world building is quite shockingly good. It's really amazing. The concept to me, and I've found some interviews where Jack Vance was talking about where he was inspired for this idea, and I felt quite venerated when I read these, because what it reminded me of is Heian era Japan, which is the 10th, 11th century. And Jack Vance has talked a lot about being inspired by kind of ancient Japanese history when he wrote this novel, which I thought was very cool. The Heian period, which I think, and I don't have any direct quotes as to this being specifically Heian, but it's what it reminded me the most of, is unique in the sense that the aristocracy of that time in Japan became so elegant, I don't know if that's the word, that it just became absurd, to the point that like they wouldn't put their feet on the ground. They only walked on these walkways. I'm going for extreme examples here. And they'd wear like so many layers of clothes, and they'd grow their hair to where it dragged on the floor. And what was really interesting is that they would speak in a language of poetry. And poetry was kind of the sign, being able to speak poetically, to write poetry. They'd communicate by sending poems back and forth, became this sign of elegance. And if you're interested in this concept, this aristocracy times a billion, I suggest The Tale of Genji. I think I've suggested that on this channel quite a bit, but it is a really good example of the time, written during the time, which is absolutely incredible. But anyway, back to Jack Vance. We find a similar situation. A lot of... So there's these castle people are returnees to Earth. Humans left Earth generations ago, leaving some behind. And now some of the aristocracy has returned, and they've returned with these old, kind of ultra-technological castles, and also a bunch of enslaved aliens that serve them. And they all have become elegant and gentlemen to such an extent that they are kind of worthless. Oh, I forgot to mention one more part about Heian society. Of course, what eventually happened is the gap between the elegant people of the court and the peasants that supported the lifestyle of the aristocracy of the court grew so wide that there had to be a military class to take care of peasants. And what happened is the military class started becoming stronger and stronger and more connected to the peasants than the aristocracy, to the point that they very easily, I don't know if it was very easily, they overthrew the aristocracy because the aristocracy had gotten so out of touch that there was really no connection between them and the rest of the country. And that is also kind of what happens in this book. The people of the castles are so elegant that they have lost touch with the rest of what goes on the planet, and even in their own castles. Specifically, they have groups of aliens that they've enslaved that serve them. And one of these groups is fed up with it and decides to overthrow them. And the book has these moments of absolute absurdity where the people from the castle talk about how unsightly it is that these slaves would deign to revolt against the elegant people of the castle. And it even gets to the point that they have to fight to see if they're even going to try and survive and save themselves from this revolt, because doing so drops their status of elegance. It's wild. It is very wild. And in my opinion, I think it was very new to a lot of people, but it was interesting because the moment I started reading it, it felt like a sci-fi retelling of the Heian era. It absolutely did. But I think that it was this interesting concept and world that gave this book the honors that it received. So I just quickly want to go and go over the different alien races that are used in this world building, but also the different kind of humans, that the human factions that also exist on planet Earth in this novel. We'll start with the human factions. There are expiationists. I don't even know. Expiationists. Basically expats. These are humans that have left the castle due to probably disagreeing with the insane level of gentlemanly conduct that this aristocracy is demanding of people, and are just trying to go out and live slightly more normal lives outside the castles. After them, there are nomads. These are people that have never left Earth. So when the mass exodus from Earth, not all humans left. And these are the descendants of those that stayed. And these are almost kind of Viking-like. They are nomads that move around and sometimes try to trade between castles and stuff like that. They don't have the greatest relationship with the castles. So there's castle people, there's expiationists, or however you say that word, and there are the nomads. The other thing I want to talk about in this world building, are the different aliens. There are mechs, and mechs are, I don't know if it says where they're from. Hold on. They're from the planet Etamin, and they have brown skin. And on the planet Etamin, where they were found, they would eat swamp mud that had decaying organic material in it to survive. And what the humans from the castle have done is taken them away from their natural surrounding, so the organs that allowed them to eat swamp mud have atrophied and don't work anymore. And the humans from the castle created this syrup that the mechs will wear as a bag that just kind of feeds them directly. They have spines coming out of their necks that allow them to communicate with other mechs. And these are the engineers. They're enslaved to take care of the equipment. And one of the first things, this is the alien group that revolts, and one of the first things that happens is the people of the castles realize that they can't fly their spaceships that they brought with them. They can't communicate with each other. They can't really use many of their weapons because the mechs took care of all of that. And when they revolt, they either sabotage them or they just don't fix them. And the aristocracy is too elegant to do the menial task of actually using the weapons or using the communicators or things like that. Next are the aliens that they call peasants. And these are small andromorphs from Spica 10 and have limited intellectual capabilities. We don't learn much about this specific race of aliens, but they are made to do the real kind of physical labor. That's what they are. The oddest of all the aliens are power wagons. They are from Eteman 9, just like the mechs. But these creatures are rectangular and have been genetically changed by the castle humans to become vehicles. This is super crazy. They put the syrup bags on these same things, but they also have like axles and wheels. I think these aliens are the best example of how disgusting the aristocracy of the castle people really is. Just awful. They have birds. This is an alien race that they use to get around, just like with the power wagons. These birds are aliens that haven't really been genetically manipulated. They're very churlish, angry creatures, but they still are enslaved, and the castle people use them to get around. And perhaps the most complex of the aliens in the statement, the allegory that Jack Vance is going into, which I will get into in a minute, are the Fanes. Docile, beautiful, and playful female creatures from Albiero 7's moon. These aliens are kept for their beauty. And they have been genetically bred over time to look like human women. Very beautiful human women. And there is a ceremony every year where the aristocrats all display their fanes, and their fanes do these dances. And the fanes grow out of their pores this kind of lacy substance that is very beautiful. And the gentleman, it's looked down upon for the gentleman to have a sexual relationship with fanes. And if they do have a sexual relationship with their fanes, then their lace becomes droopy and everybody can instantly tell. And the book, I think, says, and then it becomes obvious that that gentleman mistreated his fane. But they're weird sexual slaves, although it is considered taboo to have sex with them, but they are these kind of beautiful prizes, these aliens. Really complex situations with these aliens and all the aliens in this book, which will kind of lead me to my next concept. But before I go there, just the end of the world building. This is master world building. This is such a wild and strange place, and that makes it worth a read in itself. And I do believe that this is the reason that it won those 2 awards, is because this was such a unique world that Jack Vance created with this book. Character development. Jack Vance made the choice to tell this story through the eyes of the aristocracy. And unfortunately, he never really develops any of the characters. And I really hated the aristocracy in this book. It was disgusting. The slavery and the awfulness that they put these aliens through, which made it impossible for me to like any of the characters. And I don't even know if Jack Vance intended us to like them. I don't know. I can't really decide what his intentions were, but it made it a little difficult for me to read because of how much I hated these people. And it was all kind of from their point of view. And the character development reminded me a lot of The Roads Must Roll by Heinlein. These characters seemed kind of Heinlein-esque in the sense that it was just men dealing with situations of stress and becoming almost militant in the way that they react. there was really no interesting characters in this, and that kind of slowed down the book for me. Which means that I think the book was being presented more as an allegory than it was a story. And I do like allegories. But even in allegories, if we use, for instance, Animal Farm as an example, Animal Farm still does great development into the pigs and the horse and some of the other animals, to the extent that you can connect with some of these characters. So I feel that the character development hurt the book, whether it be a story or an allegory at all. It made it slightly harder to get through because of that. Of course, the major question is, what is it an allegory of or for? And I have a couple answers for that. A lot of the booktubers that I have watched talk about this specific book went in the same direction that I did when I was reading this, that this book is an allegory for American slavery. And I think that is probably spot on. And what happens with these books is that when somebody creates an allegory, they inadvertently or purposefully give us their take on a specific situation. And there was one part of this book that I haven't seen any of the reviewers talk about, whether they liked it, loved it, or hated it. They really haven't talked about this part. And I don't intend to do a deep reading of this book like I do a lot of the novellas that I read on this channel, only because I don't think I have enough to say about it to make two videos about it. So I'm just going to kind of pin this little bit at the end here onto this review video. So know that there will be plot spoilers for just a second. Give me about 2 minutes. You can skip about 2 minutes if you don't want the spoilers. So in the end, the revolt works but doesn't 100% work. What it does is it forces the aristocracy to change its ways. So we see that the aristocracy of the castle is going to die away, and that the people that came from the castle are going to have to become more normal, earth-dwelling people. The problem I have with this as allegory for American slavery is that the way that the revolt ends is the castle people start winning, and the mechs give up, and the castle people decides that the best thing to do is send the mechs back to their home planet. And that means that if we look at what Jack Vance's view of slavery was, it would be a kind of a back to Africa concept. But I think Vance has thought this through a lot more. It is interesting to me that he very specifically tells us at the beginning of the book that the mechs can no longer eat mud and survive off the decaying organic material on their planet, because all that atrophied when they stopped using it, and now they eat syrup. So it's a death sentence. And I was kind of shocked that the book didn't go more into this. He either forgot that he said that, or he felt like that was somehow the answer to the allegory, is that the only way for this planet to move on is for the people that were enslaved terribly by the Earthlings would have to go back to a planet that they no longer had even the ability to live on. It was confusing, and in my opinion, it fails as an allegory a little bit there, which is too bad. So, not great characters, and the allegory gets really muddled in the end. However, it could also be an allegory for Heian Japan. And he talked about being inspired by Japanese history to do this book. So perhaps he was speaking along the lines of aristocracy becoming so decadent that revolt not only has to happen, but it happens easily because the gulf between the aristocracy and the peasants becomes so big that the aristocracy can't do anything. And I feel like that's actually a better allegory to look at with this book, because the absurdism of watching these aristocratic castle people trying to figure out how to deal with this revolt is it's hilarious. It really is. The book is funny in that way. Yeah, so it's a complex book. It's a complex book. I enjoyed it, although I did find it a little hard to get through. If it wasn't for the channel, I might have DNF'd this book. But I pushed through mainly because it's super short. You can read this in a couple hours. You can just take an afternoon and read that very easily. But I do have to say, I don't think this is the first thing you should read if you decide to read Jack Vance. I think it was all right. It's going to be lower to middle when I do my ranking at the end of the year of all the books that I read this year, because it wasn't my absolute favorite. I feel like it has some flaws. What it shines at beautifully. Wonderful world building. A very interesting allegory of Heian Japan. Where it fails, I think it also fails kind of spectacularly. Really terrible characters in this book. None of them interesting in the slightest. And a very muddled allegory of American slavery. Yeah, so it's a mediocre book. I enjoyed it. I am looking forward to reading a lot more Jack Vance, specifically the Dying Earth stuff, because it looks incredible. But if I had it to do over again, I maybe wouldn't have started with this particular book. But again, the world building is kind of worth the price of admission. All right. Thank you very much for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please click like. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe. We're going to be making a lot more of it in the future. And if you want to make sure to always know when we've put up a new video, click the notification bell. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.